I would like to welcome everyone to the October support group. I see a lot of old faces. Welcome. You're looking great.
No pun intended.
I love the smiles. Anyway, I also see some new people, so I just want to let them know that after the break, anyone who's new to us will have a chance to talk about themselves and their problem with neuropathy. My name is Bill Porter, and you'll find this group to be very caring and supportive, so do not be afraid to chat and talk to us. Remember that we're all in the same situation. We all have some type of neuropathy, so there's no outside influence. I want to give you a very quick update. Is we had a board of directors meeting on Thursday and elected some new officers, and they are Pat Gallateri, Judson Vaughan, Rebecca Hattop, Michael Foxworth, Bill Porter, Joanne Justin. And we'll talk about that more later, but also the biggest thing that we accomplished this past year is that we are now a 501c3 group, which means all donations to our group are tax deductible. And as I remember, there was a short piece in a movie once that said, "Show me the money." So anyway, I will continue. Also, I would like to say that Judson Vaughan, Jerry Piazza, and Bill Porter are in the middle of updating, changing addresses and phone numbers in the membership roll. So if you receive a call from Judd, Jerry, or myself, please respond if your email has changed or your number has changed or you moved away or you knew of a friend that has moved away, because we're trying to just update the email list. Today we have a great speaker. Today, Dr. Kristy Townsend, and I'm going to let Joanne Jensen introduce our speaker, and we'll go on from there. Joanne, it's all yours.
Okay, Bill, thank you. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Kristy Townsend today, and she's going to speak to us on the importance of critically vetting information and pitches for products that promise relief or even a cure for peripheral neuropathy, and how we can, even those of us who are sometimes desperate for help with our PN, how can we make an informed decision before we are disappointed as well as separated from what might be some significant dollars. Kristy is a member of the board of directors for the Foundation of Peripheral Neuropathy, and she's given 2 webinars on this topic that are available on their website. And she's tweaking some of that presentation for us today. Her credentials are pretty outstanding. She's an associate professor in the Department of Neurological Surgery at the Wexner Medical Center at the Ohio State University, where her lab is investigating neuroplasticity and peripheral nerve regeneration and regulation in metabolic functions. I don't think I should have said regeneration. I should have just said regulation. And she's also collaborating with biomedical engineers to develop a medical device for early PN detection. And so after she talks to us, we're going to have a short break, but then she's going to stay around and be available for a Q&A session. So as you're listening, please jot down questions that you might want her to address later on. So welcome, Kristy.
Great. Thank you very much, Joanne. And thank you to all of you. It's great to see you all today. I am giving sort of a formal presentation, and I know you're recording it, but I'm open to any questions at all that anyone has. So you could either put those in the chat or hold them for the Q&A at the end. So let me just get my slides shared here. Let's see. Great. Everyone can see my slides okay?
Right.
Great. Okay, so yeah, so I'm a professor at Ohio State University. I'm also a trained neuroscientist, and traditionally my lab had studied diabetes and obesity, and how the brain and nervous system. My lab traditionally had studied the brain and nervous system and how those impact metabolic health, which of course that led us to peripheral neuropathy. So we've been investigating peripheral neuropathy and aging and metabolism for probably about 5 years now. So I had originally put this talk together for the Foundation for Peripheral Neuropathy's webinar series, but I've modified it and updated it for today. But the theme is having a critical eye for vetting medical claims, specifically around peripheral neuropathy. And I really hope that everyone leaves today with kind of a toolbox when you come across a claim, what you can do to learn more and figure out whether you can trust it. So a few disclaimers before we get started. So today I'm telling you my personal advice as a scientist and how I would vet medical information for myself to compare the claims that are being made versus the medical research literature. I want to give you information on how to be a critical consumer of medical claims, but I also want to balance my strong trust in the scientific process with very real issues that happen in the process of doing medical research. So I'll definitely let you know the strengths and the weaknesses of medical evidence. And I think that's one of the key things. So snake oil salesmen will never admit a weakness to their product, right? And a true medical researcher will tell you where there are weaknesses. That being said, I'm a PhD. I'm not a medical doctor, so nothing I say today should be considered medical advice. Everyone should talk to their own personal physicians when deciding on treatments or therapies. My opinions are my own. They don't reflect those of my employers. And as a full disclaimer, I'm the co-founder of an academic spin-out company called Neurite Inc. that's focused on developing a new medical device for the diagnosis of peripheral neuropathy, but I will not be talking about that today. So let's start with a little bit of history. So we probably all use the term snake oil or snake oil salesman sometimes when we're talking about fake medical treatments, but it's really an interesting history of how this term came about. So the term means a quack remedy or a panacea. And it started in the 1800s, originally in China, where there was actually snake oil that was high in the beneficial omega-3 fatty acids. And back then it was effective for certain treatments like arthritis and inflammatory conditions. Later in the 19th century, patent medicines came along. They were advertised in the back of newspapers as tonics promising to cure a wide variety of ailments. And one of the famous examples in 1893 at the World's Exposition in Chicago, Clark Stanley, who was called the Rattlesnake King, claimed that he had healing rattlesnake oil that he had learned from Hopi medicine men. But the problem was there was no snake oil in his snake oil. So that's where the term came from. Not soon after, there was the Pure Food and Drug Act, so the precursor of the FDA. It was enacted in 1906 to regulate the sale of these patent medicines. But from then on, we've been stuck with this term snake oil as a symbol of fraudulent cures. So one of my themes today is caveat emptor, which is buyer beware. So I think with anything in our lives, but particularly with our health, we really need to be cautious of the medical claims that are being made. And this is because there are many risks that come when there's poor, inaccurate, or simply incorrect medical and scientific information out there. So the first one is the time we lose in seeking an actually effective treatment or therapeutic. Of course, a big one is money, loss of money on ineffective products. There also can be health risks. So products that are truly bioactive that actually have an effect in your body could have off-target effects. They could make conditions worse instead of better. There could be serious side effects or toxicity. There could be drug interactions, et cetera. And to me, another big risk is when you see inaccurate claims, it sort of perpetuates the lack of a clear and accurate understanding of your own health. So your own physiology, which is how your body works in a healthy state, and your pathophysiology, which is how your body works in a disease or injured state. And as you all probably know, there's a lot of money being made selling products and services outside the mainstream medical establishment. That's why we see it everywhere. Salespeople, of course, will sometimes use fraudulent practices, inaccurate claims to dupe vulnerable patients. And especially where there's an existing lack of trust or a lack of faith in medical professionals, that's especially where they can be successful. So here we see some statistics from the FTC, which does all the consumer protection work. They say about medical health claims that people spend billions of dollars a year on health-related products and treatments that not only are unproven and often useless, but sometimes even dangerous. And this is especially common with diseases that don't yet have a clear mechanism or cause, and therefore limited treatment options. And as we all know, that's the case right now, still for peripheral neuropathy and many of the causes of it, where we don't have a clear understanding. And so there aren't very good treatments and therapies yet. So that opens up people to being at risk for these fraudulent claims. So the first part of your toolbox that I want to start with is vetting newspaper headlines or online news headlines. So I'll go through a couple examples. So for example, you might be Googling peripheral neuropathy research news or peripheral neuropathy research cures, and some of these stories might come up. So the first headline we see, peripheral neuropathy could be reversed by FDA-approved class of drugs. So this is from 2017. This looks promising at first glance, that maybe FDA has found a successful treatment and it's been approved. But if we look more closely, here is the scientific article, the original research that this is referring to. I think we have someone else who needs
The light is on.
Yeah, okay.
and this is someone I know, actually Nigel Calcutt, so he's a very reliable researcher in this area. But the paper is on selective antagonism of muscarinic receptors being neuroprotective in peripheral neuropathy. And if you look and actually read this research article, the study was done in mice. So they hadn't yet moved it to humans. And we'll talk more today about the different phases of testing treatments. The first phase is using a preclinical animal model. They showed that the treatments improved the depletion of sensory nerve terminals. They improved thermal hypoalgesia and nerve conduction in this model of diabetic neuropathy. So these are all signs that the neuropathy was getting better. And the authors say themselves, this is a quote from the article, that a variety of anti-muscarinic drugs are approved for clinical use against other conditions, and prompt translation of this therapeutic to clinical trials is feasible. So they're very clearly showing that their work is at the preclinical stage and it could be translatable to humans, meaning they could do additional testing on some of these FDA approved drugs for off-label or new purposes. So very, very different than the interpretation one might make from the claim over on the left here, the journalistic headline. Let's do another example. So this is a news source we've probably all heard of. So this is NBC News, usually does very good with their health and science coverage. This headline says, long COVID symptoms may be linked to nerve damage, a small study suggests. The subheadline says, a new study offers clues about a potential cause of long COVID and perhaps avenues for treatments, but experts warn against drawing major conclusions yet. To me, this is an amazing example of a very responsible headline. So they're really couching it by saying it's a small study, it offers clues, potential cause, perhaps avenues for treatment, and then experts warning against drawing conclusions. I think this is incredibly responsible reporting. Here is the study that they're referring to. So this is Annie Oaklander, who's a peripheral neuropathy researcher at Harvard, and their study came out in 2022, so earlier this year, and showed that peripheral neuropathy of patients with prolonged long COVID. But if you look closely at the data within the study, again, this is only 17 people. So for a human study, that's very small. 69% were female, 94% were Caucasian, 19 Latino, and 59% had had more than one test confirming neuropathy. So this is a great, what we would call a pilot study. It's great, early data indicative of a trend. But these numbers tell us, and I'll talk more about this in a little bit, but these numbers tell us that this is a very limited study. So more replication would definitely need to be done. And there has been work later in 22 already that's come out in support of this. So as we're looking around the web, and that could be a Google search, that could be reading the news like we just went over, we could be seeing paid placement of ads on our side of what we're intending to visit on the web. So we really have to be conscious consumers in those circumstances where these images and headlines are barraging us. So here's an example. I did this today. So I just went on the web today and searched peripheral neuropathy treatment, just to see what Google would try to sell me. And this is what came up for me. So you might have seen sites like this where they're selling products that are sort of electrical nerve stimulators. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm not a doctor. I haven't done research on this product. I'm not going to say yes or no. But I think when we see these things pop up, we have to think, can this be trusted? Is this backed by scientific evidence? And how do we do that sort of vetting for ourselves? So let's walk through some of the resources that exist. So the first is knowing the source of the information. So when you're reading about peripheral neuropathy, what's the website? Is it a .edu? Is it a .org? Is it a .com? Who pays for the website? Who's creating the content? And for what purpose? So some of the places where I think you can find pretty reliable information would be scientific organizations. So AAAS is the American Academy for the Advancement of Science. They run one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world called Science. National Institutes of Health. So groups like that that have professional PhDs and MDs running their content. Scientific publications. Again, I take this one with a grain of salt, and we'll go into how to vet what would be a reliable scientific publication, but that would be peer-reviewed research articles, reliable science news outlets, et cetera. The next is respected professional bodies. So we all know of the big, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins, the big hospital systems that have really excellent health reporting on their website. Scientific societies. So in this field, we have the Peripheral Nerve Society, Society for Neuroscience, and of course, major research universities who have their own press offices and vet information. And then the last would be trained and practicing experts. And there we also need to have a little bit of caveat emptor, because not everybody with an MD or a PhD is giving you reliable information. So for all of these, you still have to be a little bit cautious, but this tends to be a good list of where to start looking for information. So if you saw a claim like the one I showed you earlier, and you wanted to figure out what research existed around that product, one of the places that's the best to look for is PubMed.gov. So this is run by the National Library of Medicine, which is part of NIH, or the National Institutes of Health. And you can just go in here and search by key term. So this is a search I did, I think a few months ago. I just typed in peripheral neuropathy. This brought up a little over 170,000 results. And it's showing you here where these are coming up by year. So just looking at this should bring us all reassurance, because the number of research studies coming out for peripheral neuropathy is just going up every single year. So that's really encouraging. But the nice thing about PubMed is that all of these articles have been peer reviewed. So these are not necessarily vetted for accuracy, but these are going to be the articles that you want to start looking at. And even if you can't get access to the full text, you can always usually see the abstract, and your local library could easily get you full articles if you're interested. The alternative, and we still even use this in my lab to make sure we're not missing anything, is called Google Scholar. So this is a part of the Google website where you can search for research articles. Now, the difference is Google looks at things by popularity, just like everything on the Google website. So it's going to show you the articles that are cited the most often, or read the most often, or viewed the most often, whereas PubMed is showing you them chronologically from when they got put into the database. You can also tell by looking at the numbers. So PubMed giving us a little over 170,000 that are peer reviewed. Google Scholar, same exact search term, different algorithm, is giving us over 1 million results. So you can tell right there that some of the ones on Google Scholar are not going to be reliable, because they're not going to be the peer reviewed articles that we have up here in PubMed. So take home message here: Google can help you, PubMed can help you, but be wary of Dr. Google. Okay, so how do we want to vet research once we found the research? So the first thing is, again, looking at the source and the intent behind sharing the information. So even some of the websites that make it look like they're there journalistically to teach you about a medical condition, look carefully about whether they're selling a product, about what their goal is. Are they there to give you the best information, or are they there with some other agenda? Even on PubMed, where we know the articles are all peer reviewed, not all of them are peer reviewed even on PubMed, where the peer-reviewed articles go, not all the journals are peer-reviewed journals, and not all of them are reputable. So that's one thing I want to let everybody know, that even within science, we have to be careful looking out for journals that we call predatory journals. So these are for-profit journals. They'll do maybe a little bit of peer review, maybe none at all. And it's hard to tell that unless you go to the journal website and look at their editorial board, which I still have to do all the time. So that's something to be aware of. So PubMed, for the most part, that's where all the good articles are going to be, but there still will be some sprinkled in there that shouldn't be trusted. And then even if we're in a really good journal, it's been peer reviewed, it's reputable, experts in the field trust it, not every single study in there is going to be perfect. So the design of the study matters. We'll talk more about that today. Whether it was carried out in a way that was rigorous, whether it was had good statistics applied, whether the sample size was accurate. So the lesson here is that not all peer reviewers and not all peer reviewed articles are created equal. The next one is about reproducing data. So as studies come out, like the one I showed you about COVID, that was small, that was preliminary. But as more people do the same study and replicate the findings over time, then we can trust it more. So time is key, reproducibility is key. And then the caveats. So we already touched on this a little bit with the news article example I showed you, but having a low sample size, meaning it's not really representative of the full human population, or looking at a model system that may or may not be relevant for humans, are things to keep in mind when you're looking at the research literature. So the research literature really builds over time. And we like to say science is self-correcting. The process does work, but you just have to, pay attention to how much has been done in a given research area and whether the findings are holding up with scrutiny. And scientists are very good at being critical of each other. Okay, so some sources that could be reliable in addition to what we talked about earlier. So if anyone's on Twitter, this is actually where a lot of the researchers and doctors are. They will share studies that they think are good. They will critique studies they don't think are good. They'll share about their own ongoing work and research. So if you're on Twitter, you can follow the public pages of some of the doctors and scientists working in this area. There are wonderful, wonderful science communicators and science journalists that give out information on various blogs and websites. So if you find one who's good, that's a very good way to stay up to date. And as we mentioned on the previous slide, university press, hospital newsletters also can be reliable. If you want to look at what's going on currently, so what's current research in this area? Are there certain drugs or therapies or tests that are being worked on right now? That's sometimes hard to find because it means the articles haven't been published yet, and that can take years for a peer-reviewed article to come out. But you can look at the coverage of the scientific and medical conferences. So usually people who are doing a good job are going to go to conferences every year and present their work before it gets published so that they can get the critique and the feedback of their peers. And this is just one of the ways that science is self-correcting. So even though you're not registered to attend these meetings, usually there's online news coverage of some sort. Usually a lot of the big newspapers will go to the more relevant conferences and share what's happening. But again, keep in mind, this is all preliminary, unpublished data, so none of that has been peer reviewed yet. You can look at what grants have been funded, and this will give you an idea of what research is happening currently. So the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, has this website called Reporter. You can go to the Reporter website, type in neuropathy, and see what grants have been funded. And again, this is just giving you a snapshot of the work that's happening in a lab or in a clinic somewhere, but that work has not yet been completed and it's not yet been peer reviewed and published. And then the last one is to see what's happening currently with clinical trials, and I'll talk more about that. So even with rigorous research, and we all hope that the best science is happening in a really rigorous, careful way, but things can still go wrong. So we need to, be aware of the strengths and the weaknesses of science. Science is self-correcting. One of the great things we have is a tool called a meta-analysis. So this is a statistical method where you take studies over time that have looked at the same thing. So maybe does long COVID cause neuropathy? And then this work has been done over different subjects, different research groups, different sample sizes, and they'll sort of bring all the data together and look at it together and do the statistics and see if it's real. So these are a great tool. because the key here is replication. It increases the likelihood that a scientific finding is real. This is a great article. And again, you know, these snake oil salesmen will never tell you the weaknesses of their product. A true scientist will tell you the weakness of their own product. So this is a great article that's become highly cited from 2005 that says why most published research findings are false. And what they mean are those single studies that never get replicated, that nobody can ever reproduce. And some of the reasons are study power and bias. So that gets back to sample size and representative, you know, samples, representative participants who reflect the human population, and whether or not they've been replicated. So scientists are very aware of the limitations of our own work and the fact that it needs to hold up over time. When we're talking specifically about fraudulent claims, there's a few resources I highly recommend. This one I've been visiting for years. It's called Quack Watch. It's pretty well kept up to date. I didn't look deeply to see what they have to cover neuropathy specifically, but it's run by the Center for Inquiry, and they focus on health frauds, myths, fads, fallacies, etc. My work mainly started in the field of obesity, and as you can imagine, there are lots of quack treatments for obesity. So this site was really good at getting those all posted and debunked if needed. Okay, so let's go through clinical trials a little bit. So this is where current treatments and therapies for neuropathy are being actively tested by clinicians and their research teams. So this again is a web repository maintained by NIH, clinicaltrials.gov. So anyone can go here and type in, here I put neuropathy, and this pulls up over 2,000 ongoing studies, or some that are completed. Sorry, if it's in red here, they're done. It tells you if they're recruiting. So if you have interest in participating in these studies and there's some place that you can get to easily to participate, then you can find out more information here. They don't always tell you a lot because sometimes these are blinded so that the participants, there isn't a sort of a placebo bias. So they don't always tell you exactly what they're testing, but they can give you information about the condition and the type of intervention and where they're located. And this is not just the US as well. Okay, so what happens with a clinical trial? Either if you are thinking of participating in one or potentially just want to stay up to date on what's happening around research for peripheral neuropathy treatments. The first key thing to know is there's informed consent. So any person, any patient who's enrolled in this trial and taking part, they undergo this process of being informed about the benefits and the risks and exactly what will happen to them. And this is a form of human subjects protection. Another aspect is institutional review boards, or IRB. So any study protocol, so anything I do in my lab, anything my colleagues do, anyone anywhere around the country who's doing work with humans needs to write this up, talk about the informed consent process, talk about what data will be collected, how it will be protected, HIPAA compliant, how the patients will be protected from harm, et cetera. And then that gets reviewed by an institutional review board, which always includes a member of the public. So that's another way you could potentially get involved, is look for IRBs in your community who might be looking for a member of the public. So there's 4 phases of clinical trials. The first goal is to establish the safety of the treatment, and the next is to establish the efficacy. So is it working? And they're using rigorously designed, rigorously executed, and rigorously analyzed studies that, again, have had to be approved by this IRB board. And then from there, once the study is complete and the data has been analyzed and collected, then it becomes disseminated first through conferences and then later through peer-reviewed journals. So there's lots of different types of clinical studies. So I love this chart down here that I just circled in orange. There's all kinds of different human studies that can happen. Some are very small and therefore least effective at establishing a treatment, but sometimes they happen early in the process. And then others are much larger and much more effective. So going down through here, case studies you might have heard of. So this would be sometimes just one patient, might be an unusual case or a rare condition that gets presented and then written up and published. Then we get to cross-sectional studies, case control studies, and then we get to the gold standard of a true clinical trial. And that's where things get a little more rigorous and we have bigger sample sizes that are more likely to be representative. So observational studies happen in science. They're very important. This includes the case control studies. But the clinical trials are really the gold standard when you're developing a new treatment because they go through these 4 phases. So phase 1 is saying, is it safe? What are the side effects? There's usually less than 100 people at this stage. Phase 2 is saying, does it work? Also, what are the side effects? Because as you get more people, you're going to start to see more of those rare events. And this is also where information is generated to design the next phase. So phase 2, we've usually gone from under 100 to more like a couple hundred or a few hundred people. In phase 3, again, we're looking at whether it works. Again, we're looking at side effects, but now there's way more people, 1,000 or more. So you can start to sort of mentally put together the calculation of how much this costs. And it is very, very expensive and time consuming for a treatment to go through clinical trials. Then if you get to phase 4, if you're so lucky to make it through the first 3, a lot of things fail in the first 3. I'm sure you've seen headlines of other types of treatments like for cardiovascular disease or Alzheimer's that fail in these initial phases. But if you make it to phase 4, now you're going to start talking to the FDA about marketing, also gathering side effects again, and we're out in the thousands here. Okay, so when you're looking at these clinical trials, when you're looking at news coverage of them, or if you're looking at the clinicaltrials.gov website, how do you critically vet this sort of information? One of the things is, who are the enrolled patients? So you remember on the slide about COVID, I pointed out how that sample was however many women, however many Caucasians, et cetera. So that was a preliminary study, so it wasn't very diverse sample size, and that does matter. So statistics, the power, we say. So are there enough people being analyzed to come up with a meaningful result? Sex differences matter. So there are sex differences in peripheral neuropathy. There are sex differences in response to treatments because the male and female physiology is different. There's different biology. So that's an important thing. And more, we're seeing care taken to make sure that there's equal numbers of women and men in these trials. I won't get into it now, but there were all kinds of issues in, for example, the heart attack field, where work was done mostly on men. And then it turns out women have different symptoms of a heart attack and different responses to treatments and all of that. So medicine has not been great with the history of this, but it's definitely getting better. Regional differences also matter. So environment is different from place to place. So socioeconomic factors can impact health. There's relevance across race and ethnicity. So looking at trials that are really multi-site and have diverse enrollment is the best. And then there's the implication of genetics. I won't get into this deeply again today, but personalized medicine and the idea of how our genetics interact with our treatments is really growing and something that people are considering more and more in these studies. Okay, so if you get to the end, if you get to phase 4, then you're going to start with the FDA approval process. So the Food and Drug Administration approves all drugs before they can go to market. They look at the data coming through the clinical trials. We've all heard this happening lately with the COVID vaccines, for example. So the goal here is that the drug is determined to provide benefits that outweigh the known and potential risks for the intended population. So the risk will never be 0. If a treatment is truly acting in our bodies and causing an effect, not like homeopathy where there's nothing happening in there, but if the drug is really having an effect, then there will be side effects. So this is about weighing the risk and the benefit. They'll also analyze the target condition and the available treatments. So what else is out there? Is this creating something new and valuable? Benefits of the risks, as I just mentioned, and then how to manage those risks. So again, are certain populations, male or female, certain ethnicities, certain genetics, more at risk for side effects? Are there certain conditions like other medications you might be taking where you might not recommend this treatment? So all of this goes into the FDA approval process. And again, how does that work? So the drug is developed, it's tested in animals. So that's the preclinical phase. So that study I showed you earlier comparing to the headline where they were doing the work in mouse, that's the first step, and that's critical. The mouse is a mammal that's very genetically similar to us, has very similar physiology. It's a great place to start, but mice are not humans. So once you get past these initial animal studies, sometimes they'll move into other animals that are more similar to human, and sometimes they'll go right into human. And then you get what's called an IND. So if it's a drug, this is an investigational new drug application from the FDA. And this includes what testing you'll be doing, the drug composition, the manufacturing plan, so making sure it's safe for use on humans, et cetera. And then again, we go through these phases, 1, 2, 3 that I already talked about earlier. Okay, so why aren't all health claims regulated? And I know this is something your group is talking about. I saw the link to the coverage about supplements, so I'm going to talk about this a little bit. But you know, the FDA doesn't regulate everything. The FTC and the FDA, however, are starting to crack down a little bit more on food and supplement health claims. There's something called Significant Scientific Agreement, or SSA, that they're working on. But the fact is, many treatments and therapies, including the ones for neuropathy that we see advertised everywhere, are outside the insurance system. They're considered alternative or complementary, and they sometimes can slip through the cracks of careful vetting and scientific review. So one thing to know is, if you do see scams, there is a mechanism to report them. The FTC, the state attorney general, you can report any medical scams if you come across them. So this is from an example I went into in detail as sort of an exercise in the foundation webinar, and I'm not going to do that again today. But I just wanted to remind people that, you know, a lot of the things we're seeing as fraudulent healthcare claims for neuropathy are coming as natural health or supplement type treatments. And they'll do some of this sort of, you know, brainwashing. This is a long video that was posted for one of these neuropathy treatments, talking about, you know, I'd given up on modern medicine. I was skeptical about alternative treatments, but then I watched this documentary and it was clear that it was impressive. I mean, these are all red flags. These are all very manipulative claims that are very common. There is a part of NIH now, you might not be aware, but there's a center called Complementary and Integrative Health. This is the website. They conduct and support research on complementary health practices. So, you know, mainstream medicine is not against any of these complementary or alternative approaches, but the fact is, a lot of them are being marketed as a money-making scheme, and they're not backed by any evidence. So this is a great resource from NIH to look up different treatments and therapies and see if they might work for you. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more about critical thinking, because a lot of this vetting of medical claims comes down to what are the common reproducible tactics of pseudoscience that we see a lot from snake oil salesmen, and also what we just saw on the previous slide. So the number one is if they make a claim that cannot be proven wrong. So it's unfalsifiable. So that can include making a vague claim. If they can make a claim that could be studied in a scientific study, then that's probably not pseudoscience. Relying heavily on anecdotes. So I see this a lot in the neuropathy spaces, where there's one person claiming that something worked for them and they're trying to sell that product to other people. So remember, anecdotes, or as scientists would say, N equals 1. So that means one sample size of 1, like a case study, not very reliable. Cherry picking evidence. So that's why today I've tried to be so open and transparent about the limitations of scientific evidence and medical evidence, because pseudoscience will cherry pick and only show you things that confirm their point of view. And they'll either ignore or minimize pieces of information that discount that. They'll use technobabble. Scientists and doctors are also guilty of this, but there also are terms like adrenal fatigue and things like that that can be used in certain pseudoscience spaces incorrectly, or used in a way that's not an actual definable term in medicine. Lacking a mechanism. So I've added a slide to this effect for neuropathy, and I'll cover that in a second, but the mechanism means how does it work? So it could mean how it works in the physiology of your body. It could mean how does it work at the level of cells within your tissues and organs. It could mean molecular mechanisms, so all the chemicals and molecules that work inside our cells. But regardless, if a treatment or a claim doesn't have a way of working, if it doesn't have a mechanism, then it's probably pseudoscience. I've told you that science is self-correcting. Pseudoscience is not. Pseudoscience doesn't self-correct, it doesn't progress. It can make extraordinary or exaggerated claims without the sufficient evidence to back it up. Again, there's that certainty of proof with great confidence. These are red flags for pseudoscience. Committing logical fallacies. So errors in reasoning, things that don't make logical sense, lacking peer review. We've talked about the value of peer review, even though it's an imperfect system, it really is the best system we can get for science. So without peer review, things are, not great. And then whenever there's a claim of a conspiracy, you have to be careful that there could be a pseudoscience claim underneath that. So on the flip side, and this is a website I love and highly recommend called Thinking is Power. They've created both of these graphics, and I show these to my students all the time who are getting PhDs and learning to think critically. So critical thinkers are aware that their thinking is flawed and prone to errors. So big self-awareness is a key here. Thinking about how you think, metacognition, staying curious and inquisitive, wondering, why is someone saying this? Or why are they saying it like that? Or why are they saying it here in this advertisement off to the side of my news story? Separating identity from beliefs, welcoming criticism. Again, scientists and doctors do this all the time when you go to conferences. You're opening yourself up, opening your work up for criticism. That's a key part. Using evidence to arrive at a conclusion, maintaining healthy skepticism, avoiding black and white thinking, especially in science and medicine. Nothing is a clear black, white, yes, no. Everything's in the gray area. So we have to get comfortable there. We have to get comfortable in the ambiguity and the uncertainty, and remaining humble. Okay, so let's get into mechanism, right? Because the treatments that work so far, and I know there aren't many, and that's a big, unfortunate aspect of neuropathy today is there aren't many great treatments. But to mitigate or treat or reverse peripheral neuropathy, we have to target the cause of the disease. And as you all know better than me, there are lots of causes. So over 30 have been documented so far causing peripheral neuropathy, and they're all quite different. The top causes, as you know, are diabetes, aging, and idiopathic. Diabetes is where I spend most of my research time. So we can have, high blood glucose due to insulin insufficiency, that's type 1, or high blood glucose due to insulin resistance, that's type 2. Both can lead to microvascular damage and nerve damage. Aging, also linked with diabetes because diabetes risk does go up as we age. But overall, the cause of neuropathy with advanced age is also considered idiopathic. So we also don't really know what's causing age-related neuropathy. But we do know that aging is the top risk factor for disease in general. So dozens of diseases go up in risk as we age. Some of the reasons are senescence of our cells. So our cells sort of go to sleep and stop functioning in different tissues and organs, and other things happen as well. And then there's this huge cluster, which the medical community calls idiopathic neuropathy. The origin is unknown for all of these cases, and this is a lot of cases of neuropathy. So big reason more research is needed. Unlike in the brain, peripheral nerves can regrow. And so this is the magic, silver lining, I think, for all of this, that peripheral nerves are wonderful at regrowing. After an injury, action of things like Schwann cells and neurotrophic factors that help the nerve to figure out how to regrow its axon. These pathways are very well understood. But with neuropathy, this doesn't happen. And that's one of the big unknowns in research is why can the peripheral nerves regrow after, for example, an experimental injury, but not with peripheral neuropathy. And one example anecdotally that you all might have had, you rip a tag off a piece of clothing, because everyone done that before, and you've got that piece of plastic and you're pulling it with your finger. And sometimes you cause a little nerve injury on your finger. This is apparently a very common type of nerve injury. It happened to me a couple years ago. And then your finger can go numb for days or weeks. That nerve then regrows, and usually you'll get your feeling back in that finger. So that's just an everyday example of where we can get a small nerve injury and our nerves readily regrow. So why is it not happening in neuropathy? Not quite understood. But over time, more and more scientific understanding will allow for new approaches for treatments and diagnoses to be tested and vetted. And we know this is happening right now. So the scientific meetings that I go to, the conferences where people are presenting their unpublished data, there's a lot happening. There are people right now working on understanding these mechanisms, figuring out how to get nerves to regrow, testing new treatments. So it is happening. It's just that the process to be done correctly is slow. But there are some examples of cases with a clear etiology, meaning a clear causation. We know the mechanism. And so then they can have a clear treatment. And this is not many. This is, much more rare cases of neuropathy, but there are examples. So one is vitamin B deficiency. So there are certain genetics for certain enzymes in the B12 processing pathway that make you deficient in vitamin B12. This can be measured by a blood test. So if you test low for B12, then B12 supplementation can help. There's also autoimmune neuropathies, so GBS, CDIP, MMN. And in this case, you get intravenous immunoglobulin, and that can help those particular neuropathies. But going back up to the top here, the diabetes induced, which we also fully don't understand how the high blood sugar causes the nerve damage, aging, mostly idiopathic in nature, and then the cluster of all the other idiopathic neuropathies. Until we really understand how those are happening, it's very, very difficult to target new treatments and therapies. So this is where evidence-based medicine comes in. So whereas snake oil salesmen or fraudulent pseudoscience medical practitioners are giving you treatments without any basis in evidence, the opposite is evidence-based medicine. So this is the integration of the best available research evidence with clinical expertise. So someone with boots on the ground, seeing patients every day, and patient values. So keeping the patient involved in the treatment. So all of that together is this belief in evidence-based medicine. And most academic medical centers, for example, are very big proponents of this. Okay, so we've covered a lot about the benefits of clinical research. So now I want to balance that a little bit with some of the risks. This is a great review article from 2011 called 15 Common Mistakes Encountered in Clinical Research. And again, this is a key thing about real science that you won't see in the snake oil side of things, pointing out the issues and being very transparent about where things can be worked on. So I won't go into this in detail, but number 7 is failure to implement adequate bias control measures. And of course, this is a very common critique of medicine, that there's too much influence from pharmaceutical companies or device manufacturers, et cetera, and that doctors can become biased when they're treating a patient. This can happen, absolutely. But I just wanted to let this audience know that in those situations, or when the research itself is sponsored by industry, since bias can be introduced, in recent decades, many, many more measures have been put into place to help mitigate that bias. So the first step is being aware that there could be bias. Someone's paying for me to do the work. Someone's paying for me to test this product of theirs that they want to sell. Therefore, there could be bias. So what are we going to do to mitigate the bias? And one of the examples is the Sunshine Act. So you've probably heard of this, especially being in DC. So this is a piece of legislation, part of the Affordable Care Act, that made sure that product manufacturers disclose payments or transfer of anything, money or anything of value to physicians or teaching hospitals, and other protections as well. So I can tell you, working at an academic med center alongside my MD colleagues, this is very real. They are very careful. Can't even go get a cup of coffee that's paid for by a company that might have any sort of bias in a clinical trial they're doing. So this is very much more regulated than it was 20 years ago, for example, and just getting better all the time. Okay, next thing I wanted to cover, because I think this is fascinating and very relevant, is the power of the placebo effect. Sometimes people call this big placebo instead of big pharma. There's a whole center at Harvard that's studying the placebo effect, for example. So this is the fact that just when you get medical care and someone's listening to you and taking your problem seriously, not gaslighting you into thinking that nothing's wrong, which I know happens a lot with neuropathy patients, just that can have some healing and restorative power. And so here's the program. It's at Beth Israel Deaconess, which is one of the Harvard hospitals, and it's called Program in Placebo Studies. So they're actually looking at how this works. Why does the placebo effect have such a strong impact? And they've found so far that the healing that arises from medical ritual, the context of treatment, the patient-provider relationship, and the power of imagination, hope, and expectation have real outcomes. Now, placebo is not going to cure cancer. It's not going to cure a lot of diseases, but it does have an impact on our physiology. So just something to keep in mind, that there is something there, even when medicines may not be available yet. Okay, so let's go into a little bit more about research behind some of the claims we might see. So here's one about gut microbiota. So I know this comes up a lot in the neuropathy groups, whether microbes, probiotics, things like that might help with neuropathy. So here's an example from a study that came out in 2020. It says gut microbiota regulate neuropathic pain, and it's talking about potential mechanisms and therapeutics. So what do we know so far about this example of probiotics, good bugs, good gut microbes being used as a treatment? This coverage from NIH says in most instances, we still don't know which probiotics are helpful and which are not. We also don't know how much of the probiotic people would have to take or who would be most likely to benefit. So getting back to those individual differences. Even for conditions that have been studied the most, researchers are still working toward finding answers to these questions. So this is not saying that probiotics are snake oil or saying that they're fraudulent or pseudoscientific. It's just that, again, we're still in that gray area. So we haven't yet figured out a yes, no, or a how, or a which one is good for you situation yet. So I think this is an active area of research for lots of diseases, and we'll see much more information coming out. But again, these are the things that you're going to see pop up in sites like this, right? That come up either on social media or as an ad on the side of something you're reading online. And the red flag here is this anecdotal evidence, this N=1 personal claim, and then click here and I'm going to sell you something. So just be wary of that. This was found just by looking on PubMed. So this is an example of an article on PubMed that was peer reviewed. And then this is a reputable website that the National Center for Complementive and Integrative Medicine at NIH. So there are reliable sources out there for you to go vet some of the claims you might encounter. This is open for discussion if people want. I just went and pulled some other examples. This is from one of the online groups talking about THC, which I know with medical marijuana becoming legal more and more places, there's lots of claims out there. Here's a product being sold, and here's someone talking about an infrared sauna. So we could do an activity if people want during the Q&A to sort of talk through how would you vet these? If these came up and you're like, well, that looks interesting, maybe I should try that. We can talk about how you might look for some of the evidence behind these. So I'll stop there because I really want to leave enough time to hear from all of you. But my take-home messages are stay curious and ask questions. That's what I do to vet medical claims for myself. Talk to or seek information from the proper experts. Think about the cause of the disease when you're looking at therapies. So would the mechanism of the treatment match the mechanism of the disease? Look for validated, scientifically tested treatments or therapies if you can. Be wary of for-profit marketing outside of mainstream medicine and even within it. Remember, there are no simple yes, no answers in medicine, and take it all with a healthy dose of skepticism. And if you want to learn more, a lot of the themes from my talk and other good resources can be found here on this Medline link. This is a whole tutorial on evaluating health information. So that's it from me. Let's see, I'll stop share. And I see there's some things in the chat, but I think, Judd, are we taking a break first?
Okay, yes, I think I've got 2:57 right now. And we are about like 3 minutes ahead of time, but I think we ought to take a break right now and meet again at 3:02 for your Q&A, if that's okay.
Great.
Okay?
Thanks, Bill.
Keep smiling. All right, see you at 3:02. Take a break, bathroom, sodas, food.
Thanks, Bill. They have a 5-minute break in between the first hour and the second hour.
Do you need to get up, Ted?
Look.
Anybody like that music? I have some bluegrass I can put on. Pat, did you get your ears back?
I think so.
Oh,
I
good.
don't know what happened, but Mike
don't
helped.
Oh,
Mike
good.
helped. I'm putting up Rebecca's address.
Okay.
It flashed too fast,
Yeah, I know.
but I love the slides.
And if I could just make a comment, Cheddar Up is easy for people, but Cheddar Up does take, what is it, 10% or something, or 5%?
Oh, no. Yeah, it's like
So
4.
if you write me a check, we get the whole thing.
Good point.
Show me the money.
Yeah,
I got 2 checks here.
awesome.
Does
I'll
anybody,
do that.
does
Go ahead.
anybody have times, days when your neuropathy is worse and you can't figure out why?
Yes, Helene, yes. It's
Okay.
horrid at night. And
I woke up this morning, it was like there was a golf ball under my left arch that, oh my God, it was horrible. I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning, never got back to sleep.
Well,
I
us
wish I could
diabetic-
figure out what triggers it.
Well, high blood sugar is one thing. If I go out to eat and don't prepare, that's tough. That's tough, especially at night.
That's why they say to keep a journal, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's a good idea.
Note what you've eaten, what you've done, what the weather's been, any of those constraining factors.
Okay, it's 3:03. Let's start. And Dr. Townsend, we've got basically 27 minutes, I think, and if you can stay that long. And
Yep,
Okay,
definitely.
Bill-
And
Bill,
I can, sorry, I can start with the ones in the chat if you'd like.
yeah,
There's
I was
yeah.
going to say,
Yeah,
let's start with the
I-
ones that, yeah, that'd be
I've got
great.
those. I've got those.
And the
How-
others, and please stay on mute while you're not speaking, because it's very distracting, especially if you're moving around or talking to your dog or something. Please stay on mute. I would
Okay,
appreciate
Kristy,
it.
the first question that came up was, how long do trials usually run? And if neuropathy develops over a period of years, can a trial of only a few months actually show results?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a few things within this. So yes, a lot of these clinical trials are years long. And some therapies, they follow longitudinally, so over longer periods of time than just a single dose and a single follow-up measurement. And especially with neuropathy, I think you're right that, it could be different amounts of time for nerves to regrow if that's the aim of the treatment. So a study would follow for the appropriate amount of time to get the data needed to show an effect. And then the next follow-up from Anne here was, are the studies just for drugs? No. So there are studies for all kinds of things, including the alternative treatments that you mentioned, like diet and supplements, devices. All of that can go through the clinical trial process.
And those were the only ones I saw in the chat. So I guess we'll open it up to raise your hand and ask your question.
Please raise your hand if you have a question.
I'm going to put a few questions in the, I'm going to put a few questions in the chat.
Okay, Gordon Hay has his hand up.
Yeah.
Hey, go ahead.
Yeah. So Dr. Townsend, you said you're not a physician. What are your credentials? Sorry.
I'm a PhD, so I'm a professor at Ohio State University. I do research on metabolism and peripheral neuropathy.
So in graduate school, I took a course at GW on how to lie with statistics. And
Yes.
You did a marvelous job looking at the scientific method, and it really a terrific presentation. You didn't say anything about genetics, which is probably not relative to the presentation, but is there anything? I just had a gene test. And so, I'm looking into where to go from there in terms of research, those kinds of things.
I mentioned it briefly as one of the confounders, because with personalized medicine, a person's genetics can impact how they respond to different treatments, plus or minus. But yes, I mean, the genetic causes of neuropathy are still not fully unrealized. And I think a lot of conditions, including this one, is probably a combination of your genetic predisposition and the environment, whether that environment is a chemotherapy drug or a toxin or whatever. So yeah, I think there's more work that could be done on the genetics, but things like diabetes, type 2, 90% of diabetes is type 2, aging, those are not going to be genetic. Those are going to be something else about our physiology and other risk factors, I think. So a great, important question, and more work needs to be done.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, in the chat, I see something from
Mike Foxworth.
Mike Foxworth. Did you read that, Rebecca? If you could.
Okay. Mike says, maybe talk about what might be called reverse placebo. Maybe talk about the bias of doctors and researchers to think that all illness has a purely physiologic basis versus whole body, brain and body. We had Dr. David Clark talk to us about the effect of stress and trauma in causing seeming unrelated illness. The work of Australian researchers such as Mortimer Moseley on how chronic pain can not modify the brain and make the person more sensitive to sensations, perhaps including sensations from PN.
Yeah, and I have to say, I would argue as a neuroscientist that as soon as you bring the brain and the mind in, that is physiology, in my opinion. So I think all these things that are mentioned here, stress, trauma, chronic pain, which is a form of stress and trauma, absolutely impact our nervous system. So yeah, I'm not sure I'd call that reverse placebo. I think that is a type of physiology. But in my professional opinion as a neuroscientist, way too much work has been done on the brain and not enough on the peripheral nerves. I think we do not fully understand the peripheral nervous system yet. But one thing that's reassuring to me anyway, is that the National Institutes of Health right now has 3 big research initiatives that specifically target peripheral nerves. One is called the HEAL Initiative, and it specifically has to do with pain, which is, our peripheral nervous system. That also is an opioid epidemic research goal. Another one is called SPARK, which is about peripheral autonomic, so sympathetic type and nerves and how those function in the body. So there's specific funding and tool development around that. And then the last one is called the Blueprint for Interoception. That would especially relate to this group because it's focused on sensory nerves and how those, not just on the skin, but throughout the body, how those nerves are responding to signals and staying healthy. So I think we'll see over the next 10 years, a huge amount of research knowledge coming out about peripheral nerves and about how stress and trauma impact them, about how the brain communicates through these peripheral nerves to our tissues and organs. So I'm always an optimist, but I think we're headed toward a really exciting time.
Okay. Mike continued with, let me just read his comment. There are issues with paywalls, journals that have been bought by big corporations to put past research behind paywalls. Libraries are not able to get access to articles because of the cost. The bought up journals have hiked their prices and hundreds or thousands of %, relying on a publisher perish basis. So
yep, huge issue. We're contending with it every day as people who need to publish to get our work out there. And that's part of our academic mission, is to get the work out of the university and out into the world. A few things to say about that. First of all, it is a problem. These publishing houses and journals have become for-profit entities, and it's a major problem. Even the ones that publish open access, which means all of you can Google it and find the full text of the article. We pay a ton of money, sometimes up to $6,000 to $10,000 per article out of our research budgets to get those published. NIH now has made requirements that work funded by them has to be open access, so that will help going forward. Sometimes things are paywalled for a period of time, like a year, and then they become open access. That's another model. But usually if you're near a university, a big research university, that library will have access to most, if not all, of the major medical journals and can help you get access to those articles. But more and more, they're becoming open access, and it's a problem. And I feel it too. So great point.
Have you heard of Winsantor?
I don't think so.
We've had that man, go ahead, Bill.
I'm going to talk about that towards the end.
Okay. Someone said, would you go through applying critical thinking to the example of the foot massager you showed us?
Yeah, so I'd love to hear from all of you. So if that pops up, what would be the first thing you'd do to see if that is a reliable method? Anyone have a suggestion?
Bill?
What I have done is I've been a member of different neuropathy support groups, and there's always seems to be somebody who has, fallen for the mechanism or whatever, and they swear by it, and some throw it away and some sell it. But I always look for a person who has tried it within the group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
So do I.
Yeah, and that could help. That's anecdotal evidence as well, though. So the first thing I would do is go to that website of that company and say, who started this company? Are these people who have a vested interest in science and medical evidence, or are these people who have made 10 other products and have nothing to do with the scientific and medical enterprise? So that would be the first thing I would do. And then I would try and figure out how that machine works. So if a website's very vague, again, this is pseudoscience, right? If they're very vague and they're not telling you how it's working, what type of electrical stimulus they're using, et cetera, so that you can actually do your own look in the research literature, then I'd be very skeptical. But if they do tell you, like it's using this amount of vibration over this amount of time, and if they tell you what the stimulus is, then I would go to PubMed and see if there's any research articles for that particular method for peripheral neuropathy. Because there are more and more, different things like that are being tested. But for each specific product, I would look at, who's making and selling it, what claims are they making, are they being specific about how it works, and can you look that up yourself to see if it's been tested?
I agree with you 100%, but I always have found somebody in a group that swears by it.
Yeah. And again, individual, like who knows what the cause of their
And I've always
was.
said something that works for Judd and something that works for Rebecca or Pat may not work for me, and vice versa. So
right.
Everyone
Because I think within that 30 causes of neuropathy, because idiopathic is so big, there could be 50 more causes hidden within idiopathic that we haven't uncovered yet, right? So that creates so much individual variation. But there's also, and we don't need to think of it as a dirty word, but there's also placebo effect for some people, and it could be stronger for some people than others. And I'm a big believer, if it's placebo effect and it's working for me, I don't care if it's placebo effect. I just want it to work, right? I think we just have to be careful when the placebo costs too much money, or it could potentially cause us harm.
Oh, I agree. Some people pay $15,000 to get nothing from it. So.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I would never do that. Yeah.
Pat, you got your hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Kristy, a related question. There has been talk on some of the forums and Facebook groups on, I don't know how to say it, Sanex, SANEXAS. It's touted as an electrical cell signaling treatment, especially for peripheral neuropathy. It's vitamin injections in the legs and feet. Now, my question is actually, it was on Mayo Clinic Connect. So people are reporting great relief and results. Other people are saying it did nothing for them. So are you saying that you could look that up on PubMed and get a more scientific appraisal of this rather than just anecdotal evidence?
Absolutely. And I just Googled it. I hadn't heard of it yet. So I would take the same approach as that foot vibration thing we were talking about earlier. Look at the company. Who are they? Are these doctors and scientists who made this product, or is this someone who's just a for-profit entity? Can they be specific about how it's working? And if so, take those pieces of information and go to PubMed and see if it's actually been tested. Because again, we want to get back to evidence-based medicine, whether it's alternative or not, it doesn't matter. We still want the evidence to be there before you dump money into something, especially if that something might end up causing more harm.
Okay, thank you.
And I see your hand up.
Ann Stillwell has her hand up.
Yes, Ann, go ahead.
Hi, I'm wondering if you know of any positive effects from acupuncture or chiropractic treatments.
Yeah, great question. So I would go to that National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health and look those things up in relation to peripheral neuropathy, because I know, just thinking of my colleagues in neurology, my colleagues in neurosurgery, I think chiropractic and acupuncture, there's some data on the side that they can work, and then a lot of data saying that some of it's pseudoscientific. So I don't think we can take those whole professions and lump them into either category. I think it very much depends on the condition and how it's being used in those types of clinics. But I would trust that source for looking at information.
Okay, Aline, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. I'm not going to show my face.
Oh,
but,
please, we need your smiling face.
Thank you. You've seen me before.
Yes,
I've got
my
my point is that you can do all the research you want, but we've all decided in various groups that peripheral neuropathy groups that I'm a part of, that that you basically were an experiment of one, because and so therefore, why wouldn't you want to try what other people might have anecdotally said is a positive response? Maybe it is placebo on their part, maybe it isn't, but our choices are so minimal as to what we can use besides drugs that might have some positive effect in keeping down the progression of the disease. Because many of us have like me, are idiopathic, have no idea what the cause or causes are that's given me the disease. So, I think it's all good to do your research, but in the end, what is the, what's the positive for you?
So I guess that comes down to personal tolerance. So are you tolerant of trying a bunch of things, spending a bunch of money, risking the off-target effects of some of these things, like supplements, for example, that have all kinds of risks in some cases? It depends on personal tolerance. Because absolutely, if you want to treat yourself as a case study and try these different things and see what works, then go for it. But I'm just here today to point out the risks of that. And not everybody, I think, would have the ability, either financially or health-wise, to tolerate that sort of personal testing. But your frustration, I feel it, I hear it. I have people very close to me suffering with neuropathy as well. And it is a real problem that the medical and scientific fields don't have good answers. Because again, we could bring it back to treatment versus prevention. If we don't understand the cause of a disease and we're trying to treat it, and potentially it's too late to stimulate the nerve regrowth in some of these cases, then we might be better off understanding what caused it so that we can prevent in the future. But more knowledge is needed. I hear you.
All right, Dennis, I see your hand is up.
Hello,
Thank
Kristy.
you.
Nice to see you again. Saw you a
Hi,
couple of
Dennis.
months ago. Hello, everyone. I saw you a couple of months ago at Foundation for Peripheral Neuropathy. Live in Los Angeles, 66 years old, diabetic neuropathy.
Yep.
My legs don't work anymore. I wear leg braces. I use a rollator. It's getting worse after 25 years. I could be wheelchair bound soon. I manage my diabetes well. I'm like 210 pounds, 6'3". I mean, so my body is fine. So I'm running out of alternatives like everyone else. So I know I think you mentioned this before, the spinal stimulator for potentially helping with diabetic neuropathy or other neuropathies. I'm at the point now where I'm exploring it with my surgical team, Southern California Orthopedic Group, which I've tried everything else, physical therapy, braces, and obviously, like most people, are getting worse. So I wonder if you had some thoughts on this, because I actually have a Zoom call meeting on Monday morning concerning
Yes,
this.
and
Thank you, Kristy.
I of course have to say I am not a doctor.
That's okay, neither am I.
I'm the original type of doctor, which is the PhD type, not the medical type. So,
I appreciate it.
but I will say from a research standpoint, I work in a neurosurgery department. We have neuromodulation surgeons in my department, and I know FDA just approved some of these devices for the diabetic condition. So I think that we're at the forefront of this research happening. I should have said neuromodulation is one of the areas at NIH that's receiving specialized funding right now as well. But from my perusing the literature, there isn't much about small fiber reinnervation and whether spinal cord stimulation can improve that. So hopefully research will come out, but I hope it's effective for you if you end up trying it.
Yeah, Medicare recently started covering it, so I guess that's a good sign. I couldn't afford it years ago. They do a test for a week where they don't actually implant it, the unit, they keep it on the side. If you have some benefit, which at this point I'm really hoping I would, then they will implant it. If not, your trial period didn't work. So I'm pursuing it, and I really appreciate the fact that you gave me some insight. I really do. Because like a lot of us, I'm at my wit's end.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, Dorothy, your hand is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm new to the group, and I guess I'll introduce myself later.
Welcome.
Well, actually, my question is not about me. It's about a friend who is being treated for peripheral neuropathy, autoimmune PN at GW. She's a retired MD. She went to Johns Hopkins for a second opinion, an older doctor, now retired, and it was clear that he did not consider that a legitimate explanation for PN. He said, this is just, you have idiopathic PN. So you talked about it as if it is a legitimate explanation.
Oh, yes. Yep. But, I want to say this tactfully. I think it's hard for MDs when you're treating dozens of conditions to stay up to speed about each one in depth in the research literature. So that might be one reason that there's such differences across clinics and across specialists in terms of their knowledge and their expertise. I think they're all trying to do their best, but it's just really, this field is huge and it moves quickly. And I think it's hard to stay up to date. But in terms of my knowledge as a researcher and my reading of the research literature, there absolutely is autoimmune peripheral neuropathy. And as I mentioned, very effective IVIG treatments for that subset.
Okay, Lou Mazaway, you had your hand up.
Wait a minute, just a minute, Bill, please, just a minute. Man Singh has written several questions and he does not have a
Camera.
Yeah. He asked, is there any research for pre-diabetes condition versus type 2 diabetes causing peripheral neuropathy?
Yeah, so this is where
he said, I believe the CDC definition of pre-diabetes and diabetes is firm, but some physicians don't agree with it. They feel it's 0 or 1.
So I would say, and again, I'm not talking as a clinician, I'm talking as a researcher, but diabetes is a spectrum and it starts with pre-diabetes and it transitions into full-blown diabetes, and hemoglobin A1C is the best indication of where you are on that spectrum. So there's hemoglobin A1C is a blood test. It tells you how glucose sensitive you are. And there's cutoffs in terms of clinical definitions for pre-diabetes and diabetes based on those numbers. But yeah, there's absolutely research literature coming out that peripheral neuropathy can start as early as the pre-diabetic state. So I think that's where we get into the need for more sensitive testing to catch it that early, because as we have alluded to today, if there is with the degradation of point of no return for treatments, then catching it early is the best scenario for efficacy. So.
Lou, do you have a hand? Mazaway.
No, I was just talking, I didn't have anything for Kristy, although I would make a comment about the autoimmune. I mean, I have autoimmune and it's anti-MAG, it's called, and there's probably some other ones too. The ones that you had in your slide, Kristy, were pretty common, the MMN and the other ones, but
Mhm.
so there are a variety of autoimmune causes. I'm surprised that the Hopkins neurologist that made that comment, I find it, I think maybe your friend misunderstood the person.
No, she's an MD. No, she's an MD, but
Oh, well,
her
I
conclusion
don't know. I know
was
most of the
there's
guys there.
a generational difference maybe in.
Maybe
I
that's
would
it.
suggest, because, you know, I'm a PhD who goes to see my MD colleagues for my own health things. And I think sometimes bringing a printout of a recent, reliable, peer-reviewed research article and just saying, what do you think of this? Can really open up a conversation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I've done that.
good.
Kristy, I would suggest that you forward a digital copy of that article, because what we're
Yep.
finding is that you have maybe, if you're lucky, 10 minutes with your doctor, and there's not going to be time to get your important questions answered if you're going to introduce a research study at that point.
Yep.
So I would think ahead of, or if you have a portal, using
Yeah.
the portal to, you know, communicate ahead of time your questions about that
Yeah.
study.
Agree.
Idea.
Yeah.
Okay, we have
Kristy,
time for about one more question.
there's something in the chat, Bill, and then Mike has his hand up.
Okay, two more. then.
Rodney Smith asked if there's any site that reviews independently supplements with proprietary formulas like Nervitalize.
So I think if there's a proprietary formula, you'd be hard pressed to find a rigorous scrutiny of it, because unless you, just like we were saying about the devices earlier, if you
Because
don't
they're
know
trying to
how
sell it.
something, yeah, and if you don't know how something is working or what's in it, then you can't really assess the claims. And sometimes people protect their formulas for good reason, because they don't want to have, you know, if it can't be patented or whatever, they don't want to have people coming in and stealing their marketing idea. But in other cases, I would wonder if I was the person looking at their claims, whether they're trying to hide something that is ineffective. But yeah, supplements in general, I think there's more and more now resources. I think there's one now on your blog that Mike posted earlier where you can find information, but probably not on the ones with proprietary formulas.
Okay, Mike, you have the last question.
There was a question about neurostimulators, and I haven't looked much into them, but I suspect that these things were evaluated first off for safety. That is, can you safely put this thing in somebody's body without causing undue harm? And secondly, there were probably some specific conditions for which the device was designed and approved for treatment. And I don't know that device was specifically tested for peripheral neuropathy.
That's exactly right. So the spinal cord stimulators, my understanding is they mostly have been approved for pain, and they are good at reducing pain depending on the cause of the pain. But on a research side, where the work would still need to be evaluated in a clinic, but the idea is if you activate a nerve over and over, does it start to branch and regrow? And so nobody, to my knowledge, has yet tested that specifically with small fiber neuropathy to see if spinal cord stimulation, when the pain is reduced, is it because you get reinnervation of the tissues? It hasn't been directly tested, but I think it's a great hypothesis. And hopefully we'll see more work coming out.
All right, Kristy, I appreciate you putting up with this rowdy crew. But
It was a wonderful presentation.
We're going to let you go, and I appreciate you being here. And we're going to move on to talking to our newer people, and you're welcome to stay and
I think I'm gonna head I've heard my kids come back indoors, so I'm
oh,
gonna
they're
head
from the
out. But
park.
thank
Do
you
they have
all.
ice cream? Do they have ice cream?
Not yet, but that's a great, they probably heard you, so yes, now.
Okay,
we
well,
will go
thank
to
you
ice
very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
It was
Kristy.
great to spend my afternoon with all of you. You asked wonderful questions, and if I can ever answer anything or be of help later, let me know. And I put a PDF of my slides in the chat. So
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you, Kristy.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see you again.
Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it.
All right, there's some new people. It's time for the new pin. Let me look. Who was it? Somebody was new.
I'm new.
Okay, where are you? I can't find you.
Here.
Oh, Dorothy. Okay, what we do is we have time that we spend with the new, as I said in the beginning, new people have joined our chat to speak up and say who they are, where they're from, what type of neuropathy do you have, and, you know, just a sort of a general Q&A on you. So would you start?
Sure. It's Dorothy Robine, and I'm an economist. I live on Capitol Hill. I've been in Washington for 35 years, in and out of government in the Clinton administration, in the Obama administration, teaching and now doing think tank work. In May, I was doing my usual 5 mile a day power walk aerobics 3 days a week, a class that Sandra Day O'Connor started at the Supreme Court, I should say. In June, I noticed some disequilibrium in my gait. 2 doctors said it's an inner ear issue and treated me for positional vertigo, which I told them it wasn't. I've had that. This is something different. In July, I self-diagnosed based on talking to 2 people in this small aerobics class who have peripheral neuropathy. I diagnosed that that's what I have. So I am still very early days. They say it's mild at this stage, but it doesn't feel mild. It affects my ability to walk, although I do continue to walk long distances every day, and it's getting worse. And I think the reason it came as such a surprise, I think in retrospect, it's been coming for a long time. I can think back to compensating things I've been doing, but it never took the form of pain. It was strictly numbness. So it wasn't until it affected my balance that I became aware of it. And I'm having trouble seeing a specialist. So I got an appointment with the GW neuromuscular neurologist 4.5 months out. Same for Johns Hopkins. Yeah. So I mean, what's striking to me is how widespread this is, but how difficult it is to get treatment and how nonchalant people are about. I guess it's because of the mindset that there's really nothing they can do, that, 4.5 months, take it or leave it.
Well, I'll start out and say, first off, we usually ask, have you been to a neurologist and you have?
I've had I've had the EMG. Yeah.
EMG. And
yeah.
How did that turn out?
That's as close as I've gotten to a neurologist.
Well, that's a good start, but
yeah.
I would say that just, I'm sorry, that's known as an orphan disease. What I mean is it's misunderstood. The doctors don't understand it. We don't understand it, but we all have the same I see a hand up. Okay, Lou, you got a comment.
Yeah, I always feel bad when I hear about people, Dorothy, and then, and we just had I'm the president of the Neuropathy Foundation, Dorothy, and we just had an all-day meeting earlier, in the mid-September, and one of the things, many things we talked about was, why is it so hard to find neurologists that are familiar with PN? And it's just hard to find neurology. It's just having problems attracting doctors to the field, and I'm not sure why, but it may well be that indicating that the folks on Perry Richardson, he's the doctor at GW, and some folks in the group have used him. And is he the one that's several months out?
There's 3. My appointment is with a woman named Bayat, Dr. Bayat, who specializes in peripheral neuropathy, including autoimmune. Yeah. She's the one treating my MD friend, Perry Richardson. And then yesterday I learned of a 3rd.
Okay.
But yeah.
I wish I could help you. I would send people up to Hopkins.
Well, so I got an appointment at Hopkins, but it's end of January.
Yeah. If you want, I can call. I have a contact there that I can call, maybe try to move it up, Dorothy, if you want.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, so if you want to, send me, we'll have your name, but.
Okay.
I'll get
your email from Pat.
He's a secret agent, so he has.
Secret agent, right,
he knows people in the right place.
Yeah,
Dorothy.
no, I'm happy to try to help, sure.
That's why I called on him.
Yeah.
Dorothy, could you write in the chat the name of the doctor you are seeing at GW? Because all of us are familiar with Perry Richardson.
Oh, yeah, Bayat.
But I don't know this
yeah.
woman that you have referred to.
I don't know her first name.
Doctor.
Dr. Bayat.
You know, it's amazing. I don't want to go drag this out, but I just had this ringing in the ear just came up, and I'm a patient at GW normally, and I was able to get an appointment with the ENT doctor in 3 weeks. So it's just, I don't know, it's just neurology is a tough calling, I guess. But anyway.
Okay, Edward, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. You know, I belong to 2 neuropathy groups, okay? And it strikes me a little bit that I'm looking at everybody and there's a common denominator. Look at our ages. I mean, I'm on CJ's group, Bill, as you know, okay? And on there, I noticed last time I was on, I mean, it seems like everybody's in their 60s, 70s. I don't want to point at anybody in their 80s, but I mean, there's got to be something going on here when you start to look at the age of us. Just a comment, that's all.
Well, my thing, I've had neuropathy for 16 years, and I've noticed as I get older, and I'll be 76 next month, it gets worse. And it's a progressive disease, and all you can do is slow down the process. And I'm trying to do that by diet, exercise, but it still progresses.
Yeah, but Bill, what I'm saying is if a lot of people have had, like myself, mine really became bad at 65. I'm 72, okay? But really, I could think back maybe 8 years before I was 65. So now I'm in my late 50s, where I started to feel a little tingling in the toes, that little numbness on the bottom of the left foot, and so forth and so on. But it seems as though it gets to a point where it affects us really all bad. But to me, one of the key things I think everybody has to start looking at is the age factor, like you say. Slowing it down is great, but there's something to do with mid-60s where this really becomes pronounced. Take your next hand.
Pat, go ahead.
I'd like to comment on what Lou just wrote in the chat. He said that his started at 53 and that several board members at the foundation have it in their 30s. We have a woman who joined this group who's 23, and she said, you've got to stop only putting up pictures of older people because this disease actually is earlier. People may not recognize it, or hers, for example, has a genetic factor involved. Her father had it and now she has it. So we are trying to find out and reach out to younger people as well to just get more of a sense of where is this disease and not just have it assigned as an older person's disease. But thank you for your comment.
Okay, we've got about 10 more minutes. Is there any other new person in the group?
Yes, this is Mom.
Ann, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ann. I live in Reno, Nevada, and
Morning, Ann.
Oh, what?
Hello, Ann.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay.
We're
So
being nice.
I first noticed it when I was about 30 years old, and I'm 70 now. And I believe it started when I was thrown from a horse and my lower back was injured. I did not become disabled or anything, but I think it was after that I started noticing that my feet were aching and I got more and more numb as the years progressed. And then when I turned 60, I decided to go use acupuncture and chiropractic. And I did not ever go to a doctor, a neurologist doctor, because I saw what happened with my dad. He died at 90 years old, and by the time he died, his neuropathy was up over his knees. And so he had no feeling in his legs, lower legs. And he did not have diabetes. He did not have high blood sugar. He had a back injury when he was in his 40s. So I just believe there's some genetics there, and that I've had really, really good luck, I have to say, with chiropractic and acupuncture. So I just want you to all know that those alternative techniques have helped me a lot, but it's very expensive and insurance does not cover it. So there you go. That's my
It's a
story.
lot of wisdom there. I found out a lot of things that work for me cost a lot of money. So
Yeah.
I spent too much money on this. Is there any other new person in the group?
Yes.
Bill
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Who?
Bill Hicks.
Bill Hicks?
Yes.
I don't see Bill Hicks.
There you go. He's up here on the top. Yeah, he's unmuted now.
Okay, Bill, go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. I live in Northern Virginia, and I've seen a neurologist over the past couple of years. And he's helped me work through a lot of the issues with the source of my, at least what is perceived as the source, which is diabetes. And I've been successful in getting a hold of my diabetic numbers. My A1Cs are down to around 5. And so it's mine. I think one of my doctors indicated that he felt that my high arches stimulated part of the beginning of my problems in my feet. And I just recently had foot surgery where they fused a couple of bones. And they extended or lengthened my Achilles. And it's put me on my back for about eight weeks. Yeah, close to 2 months, where I couldn't bear any pain on the foot. And but this is my first time with the neuropathy group. I haven't done anything specifically with neurology, I guess.
Well, as I said, we always start with a neurologist and then go forward. But does anyone else have a good answer for Bill to help Bill out?
I just wondered, Bill, if the surgery helped, or is it too soon to know? Just in general.
It's I think I noticed a little bit of difference in pain-wise, but it is too early to diagnose the results. It probably will be at least 2 weeks after the date they take the cast off, which is about 2 more weeks. But it's a hard surgery to undergo. It's surprised me quite a bit how long they kept you off of your foot.
I guess
Anyway.
We appreciate listening to you. Is there anyone else new?
Yeah, I don't know, Pat. This is Man Singh. Thank you very much for inviting me to attend the meeting.
Excellent. Welcome, Nan.
I did fill up my form. I don't know whether you got it or not, to become a member. So I don't know
Yes.
officially I'm a member or not.
Yes, man, I think you are. It went through. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Man Singh. I'm located in Northern California, nearby San Francisco, suburb of San Francisco. I'm 75 years old. Year and a half ago, I have a little bit numbness in my right foot, right toe. And I went to see a neurologist first. He did the MRI of my brain and did a very exhaustive lab work. And at the end, he determined I have diabetic peripheral neuropathy. So I was not convinced with his diagnostic. Then I went to another doctor, Dr. Ralph, and his name appeared on your referral list of the doctors on your website, and saw him. He did EMG and determined that, yes, I do have diabetic neuropathy. He did not say that I do have diabetic neuropathy. After long, prolonged conversation, he said, I can point to your pre-diabetes condition, which I am for quite some time. I've never been my question was to the speaker, that whether pre-diabetes and diabetes is pre-diabetes is a cause for PN, and she said yes, and he did say that yes, you have, and now, unfortunately, the disease is progressing a little bit faster for me. It started with right foot, now it is coming in the left foot. I do have some numbness, but not, difficult enough to not to do exercise or walking. But when I walk 2 miles, 2.5 miles, I start having burning in my soul. So it is progressing for me, but not very alarming speed. But I would like to know if there is some prevention, or it can, not prevention, but at least, decrease the progression rate. Yeah, progression rate. Yeah.
Pat, do you have a answer for Ma?
No, I'm sorry, I don't. I know
I
that
thought
my
your hand
sister
was
has,
up.
no, my sister has diabetic neuropathy and has managed it successfully by keeping her A1C under control. But I have seen how much it controls her life. Everything that she puts in her mouth, everything that she eats, she has to consider what the potential impact will be. And one thing that people have suggested to her is that she keep a journal and write down everything she eats and how it affects her, if she feels the numbness or tingling worse after certain whatever she had eaten that day or whatever, but also to record the exercise, sort of have ready for your doctor some evidence of what seems to be aggravating it. But her main point is just keeping her diabetes under control, and that seems to at least make her PN manageable.
I'm trying to do the same thing as your sister is doing. I'm counting the carbohydrate I'm taking every day. I'm counting the sugar I'm taking every day. I know what exercise I'm doing. Exercise is okay, that's fine. And also I have joined a program, local program called a Stop Diabetes program. It's a year-long program. And that program, kind of help individual to manage their lifestyle, to eat right, do proper exercise, reduce weight. And I have not seen any difference, but my A1C is varying between 5.8 to 6.2, 6.3. My highest A1C has gone to 6.5. I've never been a diabetic per se, but I have developed this as if I had diabetes for my entire life. So anyway, but I'm doing the same thing, and hopefully that will help me.
Well, I think you're doing the right thing. But when you get your A1C above that 6 point, well, they say above 7, that's when keep your A1C below 7 at all times.
Well, no, I never been up. I mean, it always highest, it has gone up to 6.5.
Well, keep it that way and don't go any higher. Because the
No,
higher you go,
my target is to become 5.6. That's my target. And
I'm
going to achieve that, right?
Well, when you find out the key to that, please let me know.
I would definitely let you know.
All right. Well, I want to thank, we've got to move on, and I think I got every new person. I hope if I missed you, I'll get you next time. But I thank Bill, Ma, Dorothy, and Ann for being new, and I hope you come back to this group because over time, you'll learn a lot of things.
Bill,
And,
before you leave, could I make a comment, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Judd, could you put up our website again so everybody can see how to get into it? And also, folks, you know, I say this every time, we do have bills to pay. I've received 3 donations this month. Wowie. So if you can spare $5, $10,
Show me the money.
$100, please do.
All right. What we're going to do is wrap up for the next 10 minutes, and the 3 of us are going to speak. And the first one will be our good old tech guy, Judson Vaughn. You're on, Judd.
Okay, I'm going to do a real fast run around the site just to show some new things we're doing. This is the website, and you can get there by pnsnetwork.org. If you can just write that down, you can get there. And this is the homepage. It has a search right here, which is pretty good. You can search for things there. We just published our annual report for our 501c3, and you can download a copy here. It's fascinating reading. And then right here, you can pretty much work around the site. Join, donate, volunteer, our calendar, and tech help if it's your first time and you're not very experienced with Zoom. It'll give you a little elementary course in Zoom. This is our blog. It comes across on the homepage like this, and you can find articles deep into the site. Let me just go a few places here so we can see some things. This is our resources. We call it our flashcards. It's a way to find out information really quickly. If you're new to our group or to neuropathy, you can get information on types of neuropathy, causes of neuropathy, and advice from our community, meaning a lot of people like today have just volunteered information. We're capturing that and trying to put it up. So that's the first thing. It's not very deep, but it's the basics you ought to know. Then we have other articles that we're putting out, webinars, and people like Kristy and bringing them to the fore. We have a calendar here which tells you about things that are coming up next. Let's see, how come that didn't show? There we go. The October meeting, well, that'll come off in a little bit. There's a couple of webinars from the Foundation for Peripheral Neuropathy. The Pittsburgh group is meeting here, and we'll be putting up another couple of webinars and meetings that you might be interested in going to. Go to past meetings for things like all of the meetings that have happened prior, all the way going back 5-6 years. And if we have a videotape on that, you can look at that as well. Let me go back again to the, my time is up. Let me keep going. Our blog is right here. You can get timely articles on various things. This is our membership information, such as join. This gives you reasons to join. Joining is free, and you just fill in this right here, and then you go, while you're there, if you're on Facebook, just click on this link right here, click over on the Facebook link. We want you to volunteer, and there's a job for you. We find a tremendous amount of talent in the Washington area and all around, and so you can become a part of, the fabric of this group. If you'd like to help out a little more than free, then just make a donation on this page. There it is. You see it. And or you can, on this page, you can find out Rebecca's address where you can just mail her a check, as she mentioned before. Let me show you one more thing. We've put a picture page on our leadership, and we're putting their email addresses here so you can get to them and write anything you want. So just contact us. We would really like to be in touch with you. So I think that's about it. Did we talk about footnotes? No, we didn't.
No, we're
So-
going to get to footnotes, but first I'm going to talk
Okay.
about one minute, then I'm going to you, Pat. And the one thing I'm going to talk about is a pretty good follow-up with what Dr. Townsend talked about. And Rebecca mentioned it, is last Thursday, there's a pharmaceutical company called Win Santor. WIN stands for Winnipeg, SAN stands for San Diego, and TOR stands for Toronto. So there are 3 doctors who are getting together, and I've been involved with them for the past 6 years, and they are trying to, in fact, they're going into the 3rd phase. And the reason I bring this up is they're looking for volunteers, but it's a topical, it's a topical cream that you could put on your nerve endings, and it's for the diabetic patient, but it's called Pirenzepine, and I call it PZ for short. The Win Santor is one of the pharmaceutical companies that is going through these phases that Dr. Townsend talked about. And as I said, I have been with them for 6 years, but since I'm over 75, I'm out of the program. So if you're below 75, they'll take you. But once you reach, anyway, that's a prime example of a company going through phases, and they're looking for people again to go into the 3rd phase. And you can look them up by winsantor.com.
So can you spell it slowly for me, Bill?
Win,
W-I-N?
WINSANTOR, Win Santor.
Okay.
It's in the chat.
I put it in the chat.
.com.
I put it in the chat, Bill.
Okay.
I wanted just to say one thing. One thing that they mentioned during this program was that their research shows them that people who are using lidocaine is actually killing more nerves. So they said you may want to reconsider if you're using lidocaine, and that's something I've been using. So I thought that was an interesting finding so far from their research. They're only looking for people who are not idiopathic. They want to work with people where they know what the cause was, because that helps them get more credible research. So they're looking for PN caused by diabetes, HIV, or chemotherapy, I believe was the 3rd. I may be wrong about that 3rd one.
Anyway,
Hey, Bill, was it possible you've been in touch with them for 6 years? Is that what you said?
I was there for 6 years, yes. But it was a double-blind study, meaning they did not know what I had and I did not know what I had. So anyway.
Bill, if it's possible, maybe it's not, since you've had a relationship with the gentleman for this organization, can you send my name and email to them? So that may help me get involved. Is that appropriate to do or not?
If you use, Dennis, if you use the address I put in the chat, you just go online and you join, and then they will give you the information that you fill out.
Oh, I would do that. You don't want to mention my name. That will not help you. I'm not like Lou Mazaway.
Bill, I thought
On the
anytime I
other
mention
hand,
your
okay,
name, Bill, it would be good.
Pat, your footnotes, please.
Okay. Judd, if you will please pull up the footnote slide. Hi, everyone. I'm Pat Gualtieri. I'm sorry I have a bit of laryngitis. I am wanting to show you, however, that embedded in our new feature in our monthly invitations will be something called footnotes. And as you can see here, Bill, if you'll go, Judd, if you'll go to the October 22.
Yeah, just click this button at the top of the page.
Right.
In October.
This is obviously from our website. And if you scroll up just a minute, I want them to see the headlines so they can recognize it. Scroll up, okay, down to October. Here we go. What this is hopefully a quick and easy reference sheet for what's happening in the larger PN community. And each month I will be writing events, webinars, articles that are coming out at that month that you will still hopefully have time to register for. For example, if you see the Bethesda Chevy Chase group is meeting on October 20th at 7 o'clock, and they will be hearing from Dr. Brett McCrae, who's the assistant professor of neurology at Johns Hopkins. He has spoken to our group and will be speaking to the Bethesda group on the 20th. So if a Thursday night is better for you than Saturday, these are both, this one and the next one, Zoom meetings, so you can join from wherever without a geographic limitation. The second one is the Pittsburgh support group, and this is led by Bill Wilshire, and they meet on Wednesday, October 19th, and they are having a local chiropractor speak. One of their members has benefited from the chiropractic treatment that he's been getting from this gentleman. So they will be talking about that experience on Wednesday, the 19th. If you want to get an invitation to either of those, simply go to the event calendar link right there and on our website, and you will find more information and details. I wanted to also make sure that you knew that, especially given today's conversation, maybe I think his name was Gordon. Anyway, the Foundation for Peripheral Neuropathy is having a webinar on October 6th on hereditary neuropathy and genetic testing that you can still register for by going to the foundation website, the Foundation for Peripheral Neuropathy.org, and I put that in the chat. And then a following one in October later on the 27th is on polyneuropathy and HATTR. They have not established the date yet, the time yet. That will be posted closer to the date. Then, for example, I also found two interesting articles in the June 2022 newsletter of the Western Neuropathy Association, one on the gut's role in neuropathic pain, research insights, and a second one on pets, mental health, and pain, and some of the positive impact having a pet can have on your pain management. So you might want to follow up by clicking on the June 22 newsletter of the Western Neuropathy Association. And of course, I'm always going to tell you to go to our Facebook group if you're involved in Facebook. It's called On Your Feet. That also is a link. And finally, a reminder that if you go to pnsnnetwork.org, you can find all of this on the calendar, as well as additional events as they come up. Two other quick things. A lot of people have been very interested in Greg Masson, who was the amazing person who did the cross-country electric bike trip across from Washington, D.C. We were instrumental in his kickoff to the journey, and now he has completed the adventure, the journey in San Francisco. The video is on our website, and if you would like to see the crossing the finish line, it's really exciting and fun to watch. He has done an amazing job at both the raising PN awareness and funding for research, and he will be invited to a future meeting of our group. Since he is a DC resident, we hope he's going to join us officially. And the last thing I wanted to say is that I would like to welcome Jennifer Riskund. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly. If Lou is still here, he might tell us. She is the new Director of Development and External Affairs for the Foundation for Peripheral Neuropathy. She is joining, Nancy Froman has gone to her new community-based nonprofit, and Jennifer has taken over, and we will be hopefully hearing from Jennifer in a future meeting as well.
Yeah, she's great, and And then we also hired a fourth, we just hired a new marketing director at the foundation, you know, so keep those donations coming. For, her name is Jane Bartman. And she's got lots of great experience too. And, you know, I think she's got more skills on the, you know, the web and just general marketing versus, you know, Jennifer's going to focus this way on the fundraising and, you know, working with groups like you folks, like our folks. So that's what's stepping up. Yeah, it's really great. It's the first time.
Thank you for telling us that, Lou. I had forgotten to mention Jane. So Jane and Jennifer will be joining us, as will Greg, at future meetings to keep us all in the loop of what's happening in the peripheral neuropathy community. And please, at every invitation at the month, look at the little quick reference sheet of things that you might want to either read or register for. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, I appreciate everyone staying with us. It's now 4:05, but I'm going to leave you with two things to remember. And one is always keep a positive attitude. And remember that motion is lotion and rest is rust.
Very good.
Keep those legs moving. And I'll see you next time. And we hope our 4 new people come back and see us. We're a rowdy group, but
Thank you very much, everyone from the West Coast.
Okay.
Wonderful to see all
Y'all
of you
have a
again.
good afternoon and a good Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.